On today's episode of the Bradeaux and Will Show, we have Rockets play-by-play announcer Craig Ackerman on the show. So you're definitely not going to want to miss this one. Fun interview lined up, so stay tuned.
All right, and welcome back to the episode of the Bradeaux and Will Show. Y'all heard Brad in the intro. Today we have a very, very special guest with us, Craig Ackerman. We've had Ryan Hollins on the show. We've had Vanessa Richardson on the show. We've had those guys at least 2 or 3 times now. So it was like beyond overdue that we had Craig come on the show, complete the trifecta. Craig, how are you doing?
I'm doing well, and thanks for having me. Looking forward to it.
Yeah, it's a pleasure. As Will said, we've been waiting to have you on the show. We talked about it maybe last year at the draft party. I was like, I gotta get Craig on it, and so we're happy to finally make it happen.
I'm here, so I'm up for anything. So let's do it.
All right, yeah, I'll get us started. Just to start it off, you were obviously big in Houston sports radio. What made you want to get into radio in the first place? And how was it just making your way up from Houston radio all the way up to being the play-by-play guy for the Rockets?
Well, I kind of got to go back a long ways, but
we got time.
So when I was younger, my original dream was I wanted to be a Major League Baseball player. Like that was my sport. And outside of that, I either wanted to become a doctor or a veterinarian. And so when I was in college, I played college baseball for a little while until I ended up getting hurt. And I originally went into school as a pre-med major, and then I did a little too much calculus and a little too much chemistry, and realized that that probably wasn't for me long term. And as a freshman, when I was playing baseball, our games were broadcasted on the radio, and I thought that was super, super cool. And I was only at this school for 1 season. Actually, then ended up transferring to what is now Houston Christian University, but it was Houston Baptist University at the time to play baseball. And so you're talking about the early to mid 1990s. And so there was a fellow student there who was also working in the basketball office that I knew because of sports and everything like that in the athletic department. And the Rockets ended up, they ended up winning their first championship in 1994. And he knew through our conversations that I was really interested at that point in kind of getting into broadcasting. He was like, hey, he used to work as an intern for the Rockets in the summer on the basketball side. And he was like, hey, I heard they might be looking for a broadcast intern. And I was like, all right, cool. And so he gave me some information. I reached out, came down, interviewed, got the job. And that's kind of how my journey started. Again, I ended up playing. I was there for a couple of years, hurt my arm. I was going to end up actually going out to New Mexico State to play baseball. It would have been my second transfer, but then they told me I had to sit out a year, and I didn't want to go all the way out to Las Cruces, New Mexico, and sit out a year. And I had already had the Rockets internship, and I actually had a bunch of buddies of mine who I knew from high school, and then their extended friends that at the time they were playing football at Sam Houston State. And so I could still do my Rockets intern thing. They had a great RTV department at Sam Houston State. My intentions, honestly, were to walk on my 5th year and try to play baseball there. And so I was like, I'm just going to go to Sam because I could kind of do it all. And I knew their friends because I used to go on occasion and hang out with them on the weekends. So I was still interning and I was there doing the RTV thing. Ultimately decided not to play baseball anymore at the time. It was a really, really difficult decision, but it ultimately was the best decision for me. Ended up graduating, got hired full-time in the Rockets broadcast department, started producing games on the radio, did that simultaneously. It was fortunate to get an opportunity to start doing some games at Rice University and then ultimately University of Houston. And then we had an Arena Football League team and the Houston Comets. And so I started doing all that stuff with them, and then slowly but surely kind of worked my way up and started doing pre-half and post-game shows for the Rockets on the radio. And then Gene Peterson, who unfortunately just passed away, he and Jim Foley ended up retiring, and I got the full-time radio play-by-play gig in 2008. And then flash forward a couple of years from there, and Bill Worrell decided that he didn't want to travel anymore. And so I was fortunate to get the opportunity to then start splitting. So I did home radio and road TV. Bill ultimately retired. And so here I am, TV full-time and 30 years with the organization overall.
Yeah, let me go off mute. I wanted to say that's a big switch going from pre-med, over to you college baseball and now to sports. Will and
It
I,
is a little bit of a difference for sure.
yeah, Will and I know all about calculus. We're both engineers.
Yeah.
Yeah, we
Yes.
do.
Not for me. Not for me.
Yeah, I hear you. But yeah, I'll pass it on to him.
Actually, I want before I jump to the next question, because you told us your story, which I didn't think we was gonna get that much of the backstory. It's great to hear it on the show. If someone out there was trying to copy, kind of follow your footsteps and get a job in the same field as you, what would your advice be to that person if they wanted to kind of follow those footsteps?
So I actually get asked about this a lot, and I actually do talk to a lot of people who do have interest in getting into the broadcast field, specifically doing play-by-play in professional sports and so forth. And honestly, the very first thing that I tell them is prepare for it not to happen, and not to be mean or to be a jerk or anything about that. Because you look at it like this. Just take the NBA. There's 400 some odd players who are in the NBA any particular given season. So this is the top 0.001% of basketball players in the entire world, right? The best of the best. If you take radio and TV people who are calling games in the NBA, including the national people, 30 teams, 260, there's some people that kind of fill in here and there. There might be 70, 75 people in the entire world who have an opportunity to kind of do what we do. So if you look at it percentage wise, it's even more exclusive. It's even more difficult to attain than actually playing in the league. And for athletes, there's a finite point where their careers end. Either they're just not good enough anymore, or they never were good enough to ultimately stick, or they ultimately age out. In positions like me, people stick around forever, right? And so job openings are, even further and far between than they would be even for a player. And so the first advice I get is you have to be realistic about the opportunities. Now, look, I understand that, and I don't take what I do for granted because of that. And there's not a single day that goes by that I don't pinch myself and don't feel honored and blessed to have the opportunity to do what I do, because I know how difficult it is to get here. And A, you have to have the talent to do it. But B, you also have to have a lot of people who believe in you, and you have to be in a place that gives you an opportunity to prove yourself. And for me, all of that has come here in this market. So my situation, I think, is a little bit unique, and that I've been with one organization for 30 years. Now, granted, like I said, I split off. I did some games at Rice University. I did games at the University of Houston. But a lot of people in this business, you're bouncing around, you're working in the minor leagues, you're just trying to get an opportunity. And so you have to be prepared for the fact that, A, it's going to be super competitive, and there are so many people who want to do this. And B, the opportunities to get there are so few and far between that you have to be in the right place at the right time, and obviously have the talent to do it. And I think you always have to sort of have a plan B. But outside of that, what you need to do is you need just to kind of understand the craft. Pay attention to people who do this for a living. Watch as many games as you possibly can, but don't watch them as a fan just to watch the game. Watch the game and be a student of the announcers. Listen to what they say. Listen to how they say it. Listen to the vocabulary and the vernacular in which they deliver it. Become a student of the profession. Understand what you like and what you don't like. One of the things that really benefited me so much as an intern with the Rockets initially is that one of my jobs was to cut highlights. This is on the radio side. And so not only did I get to listen to Gene and Jim, who were awesome, but I also had an opportunity to listen to everyone else in the league, right, who at the top of their profession in the NBA doing radio. And so I had an opportunity to listen and pick out things that I liked and I didn't like. I love guys with energy. Back in those days, as an example, Kevin Harlan was doing radio for the Minnesota Timberwolves. And Gene was always so energetic. And Kevin Harlan was ridiculously energetic. And another guy who I really tried to emulate was Kevin Calabro, who's done quite a bit of national stuff, but he's most known for his work with the Sonics, and now he's doing TV for the Blazers. His energy, and in those days he was doing a simulcast for the Sonics. I mean, so energetic. And so I was able to kind of pick out what I liked and what I didn't like and began to emulate that. Also, another bit of advice is learn, again, as I said, the vernacular of the industry. Someone told me very early on, because when I first started doing play-by-play when I was in college and I was at Sam, I was awful. And one thing that's very difficult to do, especially when you're doing radio, and I think radio is a better starting point for most people than TV, because if you can do radio, then you can do TV. But a lot of people who have done television, it's very hard for them to transition back the other way, because there's just so much more you have to do. Is take a piece of paper and whatever sport that you want to broadcast, write down descriptors for all the locations. And that's what advice was given to me. And so when I was in college, on a piece of paper, I wrote down, low block, right block, the elbow, high key, between the circles, between the rings, different ways to describe different things. And before I did games, and I was also fortunate when I was at Sam Houston State in that in those days when they played conference basketball games, the men and women played double headers. And so say Sam Houston would play McNeese, the women would play first, the men would play next. So I had a chance to do double games. And so I would always have that list in front of me, and I would always study it. Then I was able to put that into practice. And so that's another awesome bit of advice. Listen to people. Like, I know in Houston, hockey is not a big sport, but I'm a big hockey fan, and he's now retired. But Doc Emmerich used to do the New Jersey Devils forever, and he was the top guy for the NHL and NBC forever. To me, he is and perhaps always will be the greatest wordsmith broadcaster of all time. He never described anything the same way, or at least if he did, it was very hard to tell because his vocabulary was ridiculous. And so learn the vernacular, learn the vocabulary. And then quite honestly, there is literally no substitute for doing this. This is not something that somebody can teach you in a classroom. The only way to do it is to do it, suck at it, listen to yourself, learn from your mistakes and get better. And then once you get that opportunity, then hopefully somebody gives you a chance to start doing it at a lower level. And then again, if you're in the right place at the right time and you have enough talent and people believe in you, you can start making your way up the ladder. But it is a very, very difficult profession to get to the highest levels. And quite honestly, there's very little money in this until you have an opportunity to start doing high-level college or professional sports. And a lot of people, if they get married and they have kids and bills start piling up, people have to start making life decisions about this profession. And so that's why I'm very realistic to people about this, that you have to understand that it's tough and you need to have some kind of a plan B just in case it doesn't work out, because there are a lot of people who want to do this. A lot of really talented people who can do this never ultimately get the opportunity to do it because the opportunities are so few and far between.
Yeah, I'll say this. I feel like this conversation can go forever, but yeah, I have all the respect in the world for you. For one, anytime I listen to your broadcast, there's never a time where I'm sitting back and I'm like, what did he just say? And it's very difficult to talk that long and not, have anything that just sounds off. Like I watched the Olympics. There was one guy, he was forced to broadcast the game by himself. He was struggling up there. I'm sure it's difficult. But no, you and like the broadcast crew, I really never hear any mishaps or anything of that nature.
I appreciate that. We have them, trust me. And
I'm sure it feels like y'all do.
And there are games, just like obviously a lot of people play sports, right? So when it's a little bit easier to tell when you had a terrible game, right? There are times where I have terrible games. Now I think when I listen back to it, most people probably can't tell, but I certainly can. And there are games where I'm like, oh, that was awful tonight. And then there are also times where you're like, you know what? I nailed that. And so it's just like an athlete. Like you kind of understand and know, and you do have good games and bad games. But no, I appreciate that. I strive to be as perfect and mistake free as I possibly can. But yes, trust me and trust us that we do make plenty of mistakes, and hopefully most people don't notice them.
When you say mistakes, you mean like? Go ahead, Will. No, you got it. No, go ahead, Will.
Because you was going to ask him a question that was in line with what he just said. So go ahead.
Yeah. So when you say mistakes, you mean like statistic mistakes, or you think like
all of the above? Yeah. Sometimes you misremember a certain stat, or maybe you misread it. Or, sometimes you guys do these podcasts, right? You do a lot of talking. Sometimes when you talk a lot, sometimes things come out of your mouth and you don't realize how they came out or what you just said until after you go back and you're like, oh, I can't believe I said that, or that came out wrong. It's the same way when you talk for a living. Things sometimes you tend to say some weird things. And then sometimes, again, as someone who does play-by-play, there's a certain rhythm to a call. And another bit of advice that I got when it came to basketball, and especially with radio, it's like, you're good when you complete your call, and you complete your call as or before you can hear the ball going through the net. That means that you're on top of it. On TV, you don't necessarily have to be as on top of it because you're more of a traffic cop than you are as someone on the radio where you have to really describe everything. But there's a certain rhythm to things. And sometimes there's a play, especially a big play, where you're just off a beat, right? And it may not bother most people, but if you're doing it, it bothers you and it bothers me. Or honestly, sometimes it's easy to get lost in the moment, just like it is as a fan. And sometimes I get too lost in the moment and I realize that instead of being a little bit more calm, I got a little bit way too excited. And those are just things kind of, again, most people don't see that or feel that, but as you're doing it, you kind of feel it and you're like, yeah, I was really good there, or no, I was terrible there. And you just kind of try to learn from those instances and try not to repeat them.
Got you. I'll say this and pass it to Will. You guys make highlights extremely fun.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
I clip a whole bunch of stuff for the Rockets, as does Will. And it's so fun just clipping stuff. You guys make the best highlight reels.
It's sports, man. It's sports. We're all here to have fun, right?
Yes, 100%. Yeah. Go ahead, Will.
I was gonna say, bro, you just dropped like generational words of like knowledge for anybody who was trying to get into that. So I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, that was some really good advice for someone. I'm not necessarily trying to get into, but I know people out there I talk to who are interested in sports broadcasting and stuff like that. So I think they would really appreciate hearing that.
It's a rewarding profession. Trust me. It's the next, I've always said this, it's the absolute, and again, I wanted to be a professional baseball player. Obviously I wasn't good enough, but it's the next best thing to actually playing the sport on a professional level. And in some cases, there's a lot less pressure involved than the athletes have. And honestly, in some cases now, especially on the network level, broadcasters are making a heck of a lot more money than the players are too. So things are certainly changing. See Tom Brady in his $375 million contract. So on the network level, that's completely different. But no, it is a great way to make a living, especially when you work in a place where a lot of people believe in you. And that's been the case here in Houston for a long time.
You sound like super passionate about it. I want to ask you though, we have the talented Space City Network crew is you, Ryan Hollins, Vanessa Richardson. What has it been like, working with that group of people? And then I'd imagine, this is something that we've never asked Ryan or Vanessa in the past, but I'd imagine that it takes a level of like chemistry between the group to put on the broadcast that you guys put on. So, no one's talking over one another or, nothing like that happens. So like, how do you develop that chemistry to get to that point?
For sure. And particularly between Ryan and I, and obviously before that I had worked with Matt Bullard before Ryan was ultimately hired. And honestly, I think it took Ryan and I a couple seasons, I think, to ultimately know when to talk and when not to talk. And obviously there are going to be times where you kind of talk over one another anyway. But I think as we've gone along over the last 3 years, and frankly, as the team has gotten better over the last 3 years, it's a heck of a lot easier to announce games for a team that is competitive and the team that is not competitive. And as the team has gotten better, we certainly have gotten better. And that's the case for anybody, right? The better the team is, the easier it is to call the games, because it is frankly a lot easier to focus more on the positive stuff than it is on the negative stuff. But no, Vanessa's been awesome. Ryan has been awesome. Vanessa's worked a couple of years now, going into her third year. This will be year number 4 for Ryan and I. And the one thing I will admit that's been different from Ryan to Matt is that Ryan is very much like me in that he is a high energy guy. And Ryan's broadcasting background is a lot of radio too. And so Ryan came in, and when you have a radio background, and Vanessa's done a ton of radio too, you're used to filling a lot of space. And so we both have been used to sort of filling a lot of space, and I'm a big talker, and I talk a lot, and Ryan talks a lot, and we're both super energetic. And so I think it took a little while for us to kind of understand. And so what I've had to realize, especially on my end, and I can't speak on how he's felt about it on his end, is that I've realized that he's been a much greater talker than Bullard ever was. And so I've had to back off on my end. And I feel like I've needed to back off a little bit on some of my energy, because Ryan is also bringing energy in. But I think over the course of the 3 years that we've worked together, we've gotten better and better every year. Ryan obviously has gotten better and better and more comfortable with the job. Look, Ryan came into a very difficult situation. It is rare for an analyst these days to be hired by a team that did not have any prior ties with that team before they got hired. And Ryan obviously never played here. And so to do something like that, and people obviously automatically think you don't know what you're talking about, you don't have any ties in the organization. He came into a very difficult situation, not to mention he walked into a situation where a team was still very much at the bottom of a rebuild. And so people were frustrated with that to begin with. And so I think Ryan has done an awesome job with all of that. Our chemistry is growing. Love the guy. Love working with Vanessa too. She's been awesome. As far as I'm concerned, she can have as much freedom as she wants to join the show whenever she wants to. And I've always told our producers and Ryan and anybody else that whenever she wants to chime in, the floor is hers. She can chime in as much or as little as she wants to, because she does a great job, and I support all of that. And so, yeah, we have a ton of fun, and they always joke around with me that I'm the old man of the group, which I am the old man of the group. And so we have a lot of fun. We joke with each other, have a great time hanging out on the road, and really have a good time working with both of them.
We're about to shift kind of towards like some, that was the broadcast section of the podcast. Now we're talking about some more Rocket stuff. But before we jumped into, I'm going to let Brad ask you the question. There, you can answer honestly here. You don't have to sugarcoat your answer. There was a day, maybe about 3 years ago, where a bunch of like the beat reporters and just guys who were, credentialed came out on Twitter and were like, we're not Rockets fans. We just covered the team. Are you a Rockets fan? Would you say that you are a fan of the team, or is
absolutely?
It, okay.
There's
no wrong answer there.
I was on Richmond and Westheimer in 1994, 1995. No. I'm originally from Ohio, virtually the same place as LeBron, Cuyahoga Falls, which is a suburb of Akron. But I've been here since right before I started kindergarten. The Rockets have been my team and will always be my team. I am absolutely a fan of the Rockets. 100%, with one caveat. In my position, and I don't think anybody can, and here's the irony, is that, again, in our position, you're always going to have critics, right? There are always going to be people who love you. They're going to be people who hate you. It's just the nature of the beast. It is what it is. What I try to do, though, in my position, I don't think anybody can doubt who I want to win that game I'm working in. I'm working a Rockets game. Of course, I want the Rockets to win. I don't think that there's any way anybody can doubt that. However, I do think it's important in my position to be honest and fair. I am never, and be critical when things are not going well. I will never be personal. And in this position, I think it's completely off the table. There's zero, you cannot critique players and coaches on a personal level. That is completely unprofessional. You do not do that. But if the team is playing poorly, or a particular individual player or players is having a poor game or a poor stretch, I think it is important for me to point that out, because if I can see it, you can see it. And if you can see it, then it's not personal, it's factual. And so I have been randomly accused. I don't have too many detractors and haters, but I've been honestly randomly accused of at times being too much of a homer, and simultaneously being too critical of the team. And so I think I found the right medium there. And so again, if somebody shoots if someone's shooting 2 for 14, they're having a terrible game, right? And so it's important. You don't want to say so-and-so, this guy is he's just awful. No, you just say he's having a bad game. He's 2 for 14. You can see it. I can see it. I think it's important to point it out. The Rockets are getting beat by 30. Well, they're having a bad game here tonight. Why are they getting beat? Well, they're not rebounding the ball, right? They've turned the ball over too much. And so I think that is also part of the story of the game. And I think it's important for me and for us to be honest to the people who are watching, because they can see it, to tell the true story of the game. But at the same time, I don't think there's any way anybody can doubt who I'm rooting for and who I want to win. So I think there's a little bit of a fine line that you have to walk there.
Yeah, that's got to be the hardest part when someone's struggling like that, and you have to kind of butter it up a little bit, but still tell the truth.
Especially this day and age, where everything is being streamed, both legally and illegally. And so you're obviously catering to your home team's fans, but you also have to be aware that there are a lot of other people who are watching these games from other teams. And obviously, I think it's become a bit of a sport in social media to criticize announced teams for being too homerish. And so honestly, that's something I am aware of. And I honestly, because of that, because I know that there are other people paying attention, I do try to be as fair as I possibly can. And going back to when your team is not playing well, one thing you can do in addition to being critical of your own team is that both teams and players, the other team, they're on scholarship too, right? These are world-class athletes. These are people who earn the right to play in the NBA. These are professionals. These are the top 400 in the world at what they do, right? At times, they do spectacular things because they're spectacular athletes. And I see nothing wrong with pointing that out. And honestly, when something spectacular happens by the other team, I think it's okay to kind of get excited about it too, because I'm a fan of not only the Rockets and the Rockets players, but I'm a fan of the league and a fan of the sport. And I think it's also part of my job to promote that as well.
Yeah, 100%. And last thing before we switch over to the basketball side of things, or we're talking basketball, but, just talking about the Rockets itself. I wanted to say you and Ryan definitely have gained a lot of chemistry over the years. You chimed on it a while back, and I really want to say it's impressive how much you guys have improved in those few seasons. I get, as you mentioned, it's a lot easier with the team being better. And so that's actually the transition we're going to right now. These Houston Rockets, 3-year rebuild. Even Vegas this past year had us at 31.5 wins. The Rockets go for 41 wins. So what are your thoughts on this past year's Rockets team? What stood out to you? What was a key reason, in your opinion, why they were able to, be 500 at the end of the season?
Well, they took obviously huge steps forwards. So what was it? The biggest?
It was. It was the biggest
increase in the league from one season to the next. They matured greatly. The biggest reason is they've improved so much defensively. I mean, obviously they were in the previous years of the rebuild, they were at or at the bottom of the league in pretty much every defensive category, right? Defensive rating, turnover percentage, transition defense, all of those things did a complete 180 this year with these players and the new coaching staff. Fred VanVleet, having him as their point guard, obviously helped out tremendously in reducing their turnover rate, which was something that ultimately fueled their porous transition defense in years past. They cleaned up the turnovers. They played much better transition defense. They played much better overall defense. They became much more tougher, especially as the season got along, which was a reflection of the coaching staff. And I'm sure we'll probably get into more of that a little bit later on as we move along in this. But defensively is the reason why. I mean, they were a top 10 defense in the league this year, made so much improvements defensively, 3-point defense, part of which there is a lot of luck involved in defending threes. But the Rockets defended the 3-point line night and day difference this past year than what we had seen, especially the first couple of months of the year. They played with such energy and force and determination, trying to take away threes, running guys off the 3-point line. Defense was the reason why they improved so much this season. And if you can make strides that big defensively from one year to the next, then you have a foundation to continue to build and win a lot of games. Because if you can defend, you're going to be in games, and then hopefully, ultimately, the offense can come along and you can make some timely shots down the stretch. But defense was the biggest reason why.
I think you kind of started touching on the next question we had a little bit, in the sense of like Ime Udoka, right? We hired him last offseason. I'm a person who believes a lot of, obviously we can attribute like the vets and then the young guys developing even more. But I think that, I gave the MVP of last season, Ime Udoka. I thought he was the single biggest addition to the team from the season before this season, and then obviously this season. So what did you see from Ime Udoka from a leadership perspective, him and his coaching staff, and what effect that kind of had on the team this year?
He's intense. The entire staff is intense. They are all business all the time. And you got a sense of that from the first training camp practice in Lake Charles that I attended to. There was a noticeable difference in that. And then ultimately, as the season went along, Ime is a pretty young guy, and this coaching staff, they're all very young. And quite often the coaching staff gets in and actually participates in practice with the players. I'm not saying because a coaching staff is young or older, that makes them better or worse than the other group, but I'm just stating a fact. This is a very young coaching staff, and this is a coaching staff, and most of the coaching staffs now in the NBA, the players have played at a professional level or a high college level, right, at some point. But this was a particularly young coaching staff. I don't have any numbers to back this up, but my guess would be from top to bottom, if this wasn't the youngest coaching staff in the league, it was darn close. But so you had coaches who could get in there and participate with the players, all very intense. And that mindset, I think, took a little while to set in with this group. Obviously, famously, Ime getting into it, LeBron. I think in many respects, he still sees himself and coaches with the mentality as if he were a player. And remember, he was a guy who had to earn everything he got, like as a player. Nothing was given to him as a player. Like his spot in the league was never guaranteed. His playing time was never guaranteed. And so he had to play a certain way with a certain mentality to make his money and support himself and support his family. And I think he coaches with that particular mentality. And I think we saw that repeatedly on the sidelines. And the rest of the coaching staff, frankly, is an extension of that. And then as the season wore along, he famously said that he was tired of getting punked, right? And I think that also may have come out of that LA game. As the season wore along, these young guys, you didn't need to tell Dylan Brooks to not get punked. You didn't need to tell Fred VanVleet to not get punked. But the young guys, I think they needed to hear that and see that as the season went along. And you don't want to see fights happen, but this was a group that anytime something crossed the line, they were ready to go. And I think they ultimately took the mentality of the coaching staff, and as the second half of the season, they really applied to that. And so to me, I'm super excited to see that carry over into year number 2, because this team has as much, if not more, continuity outside of Reed Sheppard and Steven Adams. And you don't need to tell Steven Adams to be tough, of any team in the league. So they don't need, I hate the word culture because I think it's overused, but the culture's been set. This group is the same group as last year. They know what's expected of them, and that doesn't need to be retaught or reinstilled in them. And so now they can just work on execution and getting better at what they need to get better at. And so I'm really excited about that, because I think the toughness aspect of this group will start immediately from day one. And I don't think these guys will allow themselves to be pushed over. And then you add Steven Adams, who nobody wants to mess with that dude. I think this is going to be a group, and I love that. I love that style from the 80s and the 90s. You can't be as physical as you used to be because some of the rules. But I like that mentality as athletes, that don't go seek out confrontation. Don't go seek out dirty play. Nobody wants that. Nobody wants to see anybody get hurt. But if somebody steps over the line and gets dirty with you, you need to go back at them. And I love that mentality of athletes and in sports. And I think this team has it in them. And I think it's an extension of Ime and this coaching staff.
Yeah, and last thing I'll say on this topic, the Rockets, another underrated aspect that I see is, they were the 8th best team in the NBA last year at home, And for a young team, I think establishing home court dominance is really important, and it's not something that necessarily goes away, especially with that great coaching staff. So I'm looking forward to them doing that as well this upcoming season and improving on the road as well. So
to your point, the Rockets shot like 37% from three at home. At home, 33% on the road, and the splits particularly for the young guys like Jalen and Jabari, their splits were dramatic from when they played at Toyota Center, when they played on the road. And yes, that is another important step for this group this season, is they've got to be able to duplicate the consistency from Toyota Center and translate that to their road games. And that's part of what growing and getting better at the season will be all about.
I think you touched on one thing I want to say before I pass it back off. Like you said, you don't want to see guys out there fighting, right? We want guys to be on the court. We don't want them ejected or, suspended and whatnot. But I did, like, as a fan, especially considering from what we came from, in seasons past, where there were times where you would see, the effort would be in question at times from people on the court. And so to go from that to, like, now we have guys who are out there who they care so much about it. Like, we do get it to the point where we're so passionate. Somebody might, put hands on somebody. Like I said, we don't want to see that personally, but I prefer that over, I don't know if he wants to be out there right now.
Oh, for sure.
And like there was the game, it was the Mavericks game, I believe, where Amin had got into it like really, really early. I forgot who it was with, but he got into like
yeah.
You said who was it, Brian?
Maxi Kleber.
Yeah, it was him, right? Got into it real early with Maxi, and he pushed him, and he got ejected, which I was really disappointed. I want to say Amin was actually off to like one of his best starts before he got ejected, so it was really disappointing to see him get ejected. But what stood out to me was in the post game press conference when they asked Ime about it, he was like, "I told Amin, do it lower next time so you don't get ejected," and like. That mentality of like,
I love that stuff, man.
I know
that's old school, and I appreciate it.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say. Like, where that comes from. So I agree 100% with what you were saying about how like the word culture you don't want to use, but like that is the culture. And
that's the culture. That's the culture for sure. Yeah, I hate it, but yes, I wish there was a better way to describe it because it's so overused. But yeah, but I mean, it was a man. Obviously, Jabari has proven that he's not going to back down from anybody. Jalen started to play with that kind of mentality later in the year, and I think in part is what helped catapult him to the month of March that he had. Remember what he did and what happened there in Phoenix. Tari Eason missed most of last year, but he's not a guy who's going to back down from people. Dylan, Fred's that way. And again, Steven Adams isn't going to search out any confrontation, but the second he steps in, people are going to back away. So yeah, I mean, I love that kind of old school mentality. Don't cross the line, but if somebody crosses a line with you, don't back down either.
Yeah, and I'll say this: it really started when it was after that Laker game that you mentioned. Ime was like, "Man, we're playing like a bunch of punks." He took some of those months, and then that's when we started seeing those consistent fights. And it wasn't the Rockets instigating them; they just weren't.
It wasn't. They weren't reacting to what other people did to them for sure.
Exactly, and yeah, so I love it. As you mentioned, Jabari was standing up for himself and everybody. And last thing I'll say, a little off topic, but we kind of see with the Texans too. D'Amico Ryan said the same thing about his guy, Al Shahir. He got in that big scuffle. He was like, "Next time, just don't swing." But I love the anyway. But yeah,
speaking of a culture change, he's done the exact same thing with the Texans too. They're legit. So
100%. Yeah, I need that 3-0 next week. But yeah, the Rockets, we mentioned they didn't bring in too many pieces. You have Steven Adams coming over. It's going to be really fun. We're going to talk about him later. But, we had a guy coming in at pick number 3, Reed Sheppard from Kentucky. Best shooter in the draft, 52.2% over there. We saw it on display in the Summer League, and especially in that first game. He was lights out in the whole Summer League as well. But what are your thoughts on, the Rockets bringing a guy like Reed Sheppard, his fit on this crowded team? I'm interested to see how they're going to maybe implement him. Do they go 10 deep, maybe 9 deep? I don't know. But what do you think about Reed Sheppard coming in?
Well, I know the organization, they're really excited about this guy, really excited about him. And what we saw in the Summer League was a guy who was like the focal point every time he played for the opposing team. And he played, I thought, with such poise, and he played under control. much better playmaker than honestly I guess I was expecting, especially at his size. I think he's probably going to have to play a lot more. I mean, he could probably play off the ball if he's paired with another bigger backcourt mate, like say Ime Thompson, certainly in terms of defensive matchups. But he played with so much more poise and under control than I kind of thought. I admit this openly. I do not watch a ton of college basketball. I'm just sort of completely focused on the NBA. I think this could be a topic for another time. I think college basketball is a completely different sport from the NBA, and it could be changed for the better. But again, we could say that. I could probably go on for an hour about that another time. But obviously he can shoot the rock. He receives so much attention. And again, he really seemed to play with that sort of I belong feel. I'm not trying to compare him to Chris Paul, but he played with that kind of just I'm in control. I know what I'm doing. I understand the game kind of thing. At least that's what it seemed like. And it's only summer league, so you can't go too far off the board there with projecting that into what the NBA is like. But that's all we have, so I guess that's what we'll go with. But I know the organization's super excited about him. Ultimately, how much he's going to play and how much they're going to use him, we'll find out. You brought up how deep is the Rockets' rotation going to be? I think they legitimately have probably at least 12 guys, 13 guys who have legitimate, and that's kind of been the case too in the last couple of years, who have legitimate cases to be part of the rotation. But obviously there are some guys who are going to get squeezed, and I think it can be difficult, honestly, at times to play 10-man rotations, not because the guys don't deserve an opportunity, but Mike D'Antoni used to say, Mike, obviously one of the biggest criticisms of Mike was that his rotation was far too short. And his response was always, okay, well, I get it. And there's certainly guys that deserve to play. You want me to take minutes away from James Harden? Like, you want me to take minutes away from Chris Paul? Yeah, I mean, these are my best players. Like, I want them to play. I want to win. And so it's going to be interesting to see how ultimately that shakes out if they can sustain a 10-man rotation, because I think historically speaking, it's tough for teams to run a 10-man rotation. But there will be some injuries, knock on wood, but there will be some injuries as we go along through the season. And so the Rockets' depth will be something I think will be a big positive for them. So we'll have to see it shake out. But yeah, I'm excited about Reed. A lot of people are expecting him to be in the race there for Rookie of the Year. And whether or not he gets enough usage and playing time remains to be seen. But I'm excited about watching him play, and so too are the Rockets.
Yeah, and before I pass to it, and this is actually on the topic of our next question, we're going to be talking about the Rockets bench, how amazing it is. But yeah, just how talented this team is right now. It's a great problem to have, right? But Will and I have tried to create the perfect 10-man rotation, and it's extremely difficult without shaving minutes off of a player who really you would think needs those minutes. And you even mentioned it. You said maybe 13 guys, and I'm assuming you're talking about Jeff Green, Jason Tate, and Aaron Holiday being guys outside the rotation.
Jock Landale. Yeah. Look, he was not healthy he did not play well at all for about 75% of last season.
You're right. Yeah.
But that last quarter and in his play for Australia in the summer, he was really good.
He was.
Really good. That's the guy who the Rockets wanted when they originally signed it. And obviously it turned out he just wasn't healthy and wasn't able to do it. But once he did get healthy, he was really good out there.
Yeah, and that 14 right now is actually, I think, the 14-man roster for the Rockets. So all 14 guys could technically get out there. So yeah, I'm just interested to see how Ime is able to craft a 9-man rotation. So I'm excited about that. But again, good problem to have. I'll pass it off to him.
Yeah, I mean, no, that was I'm laughing at what we just talked about. The next question we had was obviously about the bench. And like I'm on record. I think we're gonna have one of I don't want to say the best just yet, because I don't really know what other bench we're gonna see, but I think we're gonna have one of the best benches in the NBA next season. You're gonna have Ime Thompson coming off the bench, who that's someone who I'm super duper high on. I think he can play multiple positions, do multiple things out there on the court. We talked about Reed Sheppard coming out of Kentucky and what he's gonna be able to hopefully do for us off our bench next year. You have Tari Eason coming back from injury. He's another guy who,
outside of his mom, I think I might be the president of the Tari Eason fan club.
Yeah, the Tari. Yeah, he's such the thing about Tari is like if you just look at his raw numbers, you probably wouldn't get it. But then you cut the game on, you're like, I understand.
That dude's a winner, and he makes winning plays.
Yeah, you get it. You get it immediately. Then you have Cam Whitmore is out there too, another guy who I think maybe that might be. I don't know, Brad. You can correct me if I'm wrong on this. I think the fan base might have been the happiest of all like the drafts. I think he was the happiest pick we've ever had, just because no one saw it coming. I think that was the happiest I've seen our fan base get over a draft pick. But you can correct me if I'm wrong, Brad.
And no, and Craig, this is when again we were at the exact same venue. We all were, and so you were there when they picked the Rockets 20th. They picked Cam Whitmore 20th overall, and everybody was erupting. So I agree.
I think we cheered louder than we picked them. And no disrespect to Amin. Amin is probably my favorite player on the roster, but like I think we cheered louder than when we got Cam.
That guy,
I don't think no one saw it coming.
Pure bucket getter. He is so much fun to watch. The fact that he slipped to 20 is just, it blows my mind. That he slipped. I mean, obviously glad he did. Look, there are some things that he has to work on his game. He's got to get a little bit more discipline. He's got to get better defensively. But that dude is a pure bucket getter. And for the pure entertainment aspect of what we are witnessing, that dude's at the top of the list. Like I'll get admit, I love KJ Martin. Great dude, by the way. He was so fun to watch, and I was a little bummed that he wasn't being brought back. Cam Whitmore's filled that void.
He made up for it. Yeah, and then to round it out, Steven Adams, like you said, the guy who no one's going to challenge him. We know what he can do in this league. He's
another guy that's a winner.
I'll say we battled against him in the playoffs a couple of times now.
He has unlocked the best of pretty much everyone he's ever played with, especially
the guards
because of his ability to set screens and then play off those picks and the passing and if he's healthy, and by all accounts he is, but how much he'll be able to ramp up, we'll find out here shortly. I thought that was a sneaky good move that Rafael Stone made last season for this season. I've always been a huge fan of Steven Adams. In the same regard that I am a huge fan of Tari Eason, because there are things that those two guys do that you need on your team that, as you mentioned, they don't necessarily show up in the box score, but that leads to winning a lot of games.
Yeah. That was just my long way of saying, like, what are your thoughts on the bench next year? Like I said, we could, like Brian said, it's going to be tough because there's not enough minutes for everyone to go around, but we do have like that. The guys that's legit 5 who you could argue could like almost start a game for us one day.
I agree with you. I think the Rockets have the potential to have the best bench in the league. Now, whether that happens or not, we'll find out. I think what it will have is, I think another thing we can all agree on is that Fred played too many minutes last year. And I think the coaches would agree with that. He had to early on in the season out of necessity because they just needed him on the floor because what he brought to the team, nobody else was giving them, and they needed him to play. So hopefully his minutes can be drastically reduced is probably too strong of a word, but if they could, I mean, let me look here. What did he play last year? He averaged 37 minutes a game.
Yeah.
If he could play 30 a night, right? 28 a night, that ultimately would create, and as long as he's on the floor in winning time when you need him, if that can happen, that'll keep him fresher, right? Because he got off to an awesome start last year. He's playing the best basketball of his career. He was awesome. Mm-hmm. And I think fatigue set in a little bit. If you can keep him fresher, but also that'll open up some more backcourt rotation minutes for guys like Reed and Cam and Ime. Obviously, Ime, as you mentioned, can play all over the place, but it will open up some additional opportunities for him. And then you could play some different combinations with Jalen and all those guys. You can try to mix and match and figure out to see what exactly works best. I think that will ultimately be ideal as well. So, but yeah, I think there's a lot of ways this team can go. I mean, Aaron Holiday helped them win some games last year. Jeff Green helped them win some games last year. So did Jock. Jayshawn Tate's been a rock since he's been here. And I still say that Jayshawn's a guy that there are a lot of teams in this league, a lot of really good teams in this league that would love to have him on their bench as part of their rotation because he does some of those little things that teams need. And so, yeah, the Rockets are deep, really deep, and hopefully they don't have any injuries, but I think they'll be able to sustain some of that as the season goes along. And yeah, I think it's going to be it's a nice problem for the coaching staff to have to figure out how all this stuff works.
Yeah, and throwing in a bonus question here, not even a question, but I want you to tell the people how impactful the duo Ime and we talked about Tari Eason and how much of a winner and how impactful he is. I see Ime Thompson as the exact same kind of guy, and these are two guys who I would, for the most part, want to give at least 30 minutes a night to, if not more than 25. They're that good. But as a duo, they're going to create so much havoc, and I know you definitely.
Oh yeah, they're both long, they're both athletic, they're both tenacious. Obviously, look, I think Ime Thompson is going to make multiple all-defensive teams in his career. I think we saw that last year. Unless something shocking and surprising happens, I think that is absolutely his floor. Like his minimum is he's going to be one of the league's best defensive players his entire career. I think obviously for him to ultimately unlock the next level of his game, he's got to become a better shooter. I think just in the modern game, it just has to happen. Now, can he ultimately survive with being a well below average shooter? Long term, I guess we'll find out. I think he's obviously certainly showed flashes last year that he can thrive without having a reliable jumper. But you also, because of that, then comes the decision making of, well, who can you play him with? Because you can't have two non-floor spacers on the floor in the league anymore. And so, can he improve I think so. And for that reason, he's got to improve his shot. I think obviously that's probably job number one that we need to see from Alperen Şengün this year. Doesn't need to shoot 38% from three, right? But he's got to be able to shoot enough where teams respect him out there. And I think if you do, then if you can play guys like Ime and Şengün on the floor together, I think that really unlocks a lot of other things. Because Ime, he's so big, he's so athletic, sees the floor well. Obviously, he's a guard, and so he has a guard mentality, but can play all over the floor. And so to have other guys who are connective players who can move the ball and pass and cut, I think, again, Ime's got a super bright future. But yes, the Rockets, I think, have the potential to wreak a ton of defensive havoc because those two guys have motors that will not stop. And I know that's something that the coaching staff loves as well.
100% agree.
Brad knows that. Like, if we start talking about Ime, I can talk about Ime for like 30 straight minutes. So that's probably my favorite player in the entire NBA. But one thing I did want to kind of throw out there that we talked about a lot on this pod is like, I don't know if people give Ime enough credit for essentially switching positions and play style mid-season with no prior experience at that position. Like he talked about, I think Vanessa interviewed him one time and he's like, I've never set screens before.
Yeah.
And he goes from high school and where he came from OT, where he's the point guard, the ball's in his hands pretty much every possession. He's running the show. And now he's primarily off ball. He's setting screens. He's rolling to the basket. He's catching lobs. He's playing the dunker spot. Like that's just two like diametrically opposed roles. And he was able to play both of them. And I thought he did really well, especially like when you moved him to that off ball role where he's setting screens, he's rolling, he's playing dunker spot. I thought he played really, really well. I think that was, obviously you don't want to see Şengün go down with injury, but I do think that when Şengün went down with injury, that opened up more opportunity for Ime to kind of spread his wings in that department. And I do think that was one of the reasons why we had the march that we did have, because now Ime's out there, the pace is a lot faster because now you have another generational athlete out there who's pushing the ball in transition. You have someone who you touched on. I agree. I think the floor for him absolutely is a multiple time all defensive member. I think he's going to make the team multiple times in his career just because of how versatile he is out there. And we saw that obviously, like I said, in the month of March. And so, yeah, I don't think people give him enough credit for just how he was able to just like most people wouldn't be able to do that, to tell them the ball's not going to be in your hands anymore. Come set screens, come roll to the basket. I don't know, there's a lot of guys in the NBA whose like egos would let them be able to do that. And Ime embraced the role. And like I said, not only did he embrace it, he was awesome at it. So.
Yeah, he's a smart dude. I mean, and credit to him. Also, remember, the majority of the first half of his rookie season was kind of lost on injuries and illness, right? He never could get a rhythm in the first 3 months of the year, right? Because he had a little injury here and there. And so it's not like he hit the ground running when the season started, coming off a great training camp. But this all really had to happen right in the middle of the season. And credit, all the credit to him. And look, it's kind of a similar situation to where, Tari Eason, when he came in as a rookie, we're like, well, where's this guy going to play? He's not going to play much. He's going to spend time in the G League. And he just forced his way onto the floor. And I think Ime Thompson, because of his ability to adapt and to be versatile and to accept different roles, was he forced the coaches to play him, and he excelled in that. And so I think that bodes really well again for his long-term future. I mentioned that you could put a guy who I think Reed Sheppard is certainly a capable defender, but his lack of size is something that guys typically can't overcome. There will be certain matchups that does become a detriment to him just because you just can't help it. You pair him in a backcourt, then you can mix and match and switch and figure out different things. And a guy like Ime, his versatility, I think it makes things a lot easier. And again, his ability to adapt and force his way out on the floor is, I guess he played a little bit more like his brother had played historically this past year than he had as a lead guard.
Yeah.
And then
no, go ahead. You got it. Go ahead.
No, I was saying that was it for me on the men topic. I was just gonna move straight to the last question that I have. If I I might come up with something else before the show ends. But the last question I have for you today is just 2024, 2025 Houston Rockets expectations. We talked about it off camera a little bit. The broadcasters do get the first round of the playoffs this year. So I said
the last go around.
Yeah, the last time they're gonna do that. I stated a couple times on the podcast. I think they're gonna make the playoffs this year. So fingers crossed. I think you will be broadcasting a playoff game or a playoff series this upcoming season. But what are your expectations for the team going into this upcoming season?
Well, I think this team will be better than they were last year. I think that's a given. How ultimately that being better will be reflected in their record, to me personally, I think is still to be determined as we see the season play out. The West is loaded. You can make a case for everyone, perhaps maybe except the Blazers, maybe a little less. I thought last year the Rockets were on the same level as the Utah Jazz, and obviously they had some injuries, and then they pulled the plug at the end of the season. If the Jazz come in healthy, they still have the Rockets. The Rockets don't. They're young. None of the young guys have yet to become an all-star. Larry Markin has made an all-star team. So, but I think you can make a case for all but maybe two or maybe just one of the Western Conference teams that they're going to be fighting and gunning for at least a play-in spot. And obviously there are going to be some teams who get left out of that mix. I think inevitably there's going to be a team or two that takes a step back, as there is every year. Inevitably there'll be a team or two that takes a step forward. The Rockets were one of those teams last year, as was the case with Oklahoma City. And so, like, Ja Morant is back. That's been a 50-win team when he's been healthy. We'll have to see how Zach Edey fills the void in the middle for them as a rookie moving forward. But they had tremendous, horrible injury luck last season. I don't know how it's ultimately play out, but to me, I think the goal is to make the plan. And if they don't make the plan coming off of what they did last year, then I think ultimately the season will be qualified and classified as a disappointment. I think anything beyond that for this young group will be gravy, but hopefully guys can continue to take steps forward. Obviously last year, Alperen Sengun made a huge step forward. Jabari Smith Jr. took a huge step forward. Jalen Green was better. Well, I think what Jalen did in March, and again, the Rockets' schedule was much easier in the month of March than it had been previously, which I think did lend to some of that play from him there. But I think what Jalen did in March was legit. I think it was more of a mentality thing than it was level of competition thing, or whether or not Sengun was on or off the floor. I mean, Alperen was there at the start of that run before he got hurt. And so I think a lot of that discussion is a little bit wild. I think Jalen's uptake, and we've seen him have stretches like that before in the past, but I think what he did in March was sustainable, because to me, it was more of a mentality thing than it was anything else. But I expect bigger and better things from him this season. The Rockets are going to be better. Can they become a more consistent team? Offensively, they had some moments that we've already talked a little bit about. Can they? But on the road, they were not a very good offensive team. Consistency was an issue. They got better as a shooting team, but they have to be better. They have to be better. They got so much better last year defensively. They made some minor steps in terms of their movement offensively. I mean, what they finished like 26th in offensive efficiency or some 20th in offensive rating. It was their effective field goal percentage. I think that was around 26. The previous couple of years they've been 30. So they made some strides offensively. They got to get better there. Hopefully Reed Sheppard will help in that department. Jalen Green can become a more consistent shooter. Alperen Şengün can develop a little bit with his 3-point shot. Jabari continued to take a little go from 36-ish% to 38-ish% on for him. I don't have the numbers in front of me. What did he end up shooting last year? 36. Hopefully he can become a 38% shooter from 3. So if they can do that, this team's going to be in the mix. They were competitive last year, and I think they're going to be even more competitive this season. And I think they have the right mentality that they're not willing to back down from anyone. And this will be a group that no one's going to want to play against. So they're going to be better. We'll have to, I think, ultimately have to wait and see. I don't know. I'm not here to predict what their win total is going to be, but I think they're going to be there in the mix for at minimum the play-in tournament. And I think it's just going to be an absolutely fascinating season. I mean, you're playing in the division with Luka, one of the best players in the sport. They just made the finals. I think Victor Wembanyama's he's probably on track to be the best player in the league in the next couple of years. He's not going to be easy to deal with. The Pelicans roster is a little bit funky, but as long as Zion is healthy, and obviously it's a big question mark. I'm a huge Zion Williamson fan. I think and when healthy, he's one of the best players in the sport. He's in your division. We already talked about the Grizzlies and John Morant coming back. So the division itself is going to be really, really tough. It's not like Minnesota's going to go anywhere with their group. You still got LeBron and AD in LA. They're still doing their thing. You still got Steph Curry with the Warriors. He's still obviously at the top of his game. We saw what he did for Team USA in the Olympics. Jokic is the best player in the world. The Suns, I think, had a tremendous offseason with what very little they had to work with, and they still have Kevin Durant and Devin Booker. They're not going to be an easy team to play. So it's going to be – there's not going to be a single game on the Western Conference that's going to be an easy out, I think. And I think this team is certainly ready for that level of competition, and they will be competitive and they will be better, and hopefully that will ultimately mean that they will make the play-in and or further steps than that, we get a chance to do some playoff games in the first round.
I think there's a good chance you guys will be doing those first round playoff games for sure. I personally, if everything goes right for me, it's really two factors. If Jalen Green comes out and capitalizes on that month of March and the Rockets don't have any ridiculous injuries, I personally believe they can win 50 games. I don't know if I'm a lunatic for that, but I think they can do it. I just see the depth of the team, and I can go on and on, but I think it's possible. So
what is their over under? Is it 43.5 or 44.5?
We're on the money, 43.5, and I think that's a ridiculous low ball.
Yeah, I can't really get into gambling in my thing here, but let's just say I think the number is going to be north of there.
Yeah.
How much north of there? Again, injuries and exactly not only the Rockets injuries, but injuries for other teams. Like, what are the Clippers? The Clippers are different. Like, what are they going to be like? Right? Paul George is no longer there. I mean, obviously they still have James Harden. Is Kawhi Leonard going to be healthy? That's a big if, but if he's healthy, obviously he's still one of the best players in the world, even though they are getting a little bit older there. There's I think it's going to be absolutely fascinating. I think there is as much talent in the NBA now as there's ever been in the history of the sport. And I think that was one goal of Adam Silver for competitive balance, to be better and greater across the board. And I think with the way that they've set things up with the cap and luxury tax and all the penalties that are associated with that, I think that there is a lot more talent spread a lot more evenly across the league. And I also think that there's just so much more talent in the league now than we've ever seen before. Not to say that the great players from the past couldn't be great today. They will. They were great then. They would be great now. But I just think from top to bottom, the league's in a really good place.
Yeah, and I'm excited for the league expansion that will happen eventually, as you mentioned.
Yeah.
The league is really, really stacked right now. So bringing two teams in, probably Vegas and Seattle, is going to make it even more of a fun league. So, yeah, this is pretty much my last question, though. I kind of said my Rockets hot take. I think they'll win 50 games. I also believe they'll probably be the best team in the NBA and offensive rebounding, just with Tari and then Steven Adams as well.
They got a chance. They got a chance.
Yeah. So I wanted to ask you if you had a specific hot take or something specific you want the fans to look out for next season. What would you say?
Hot take? I don't know if I'm much of a hot take guy. Hot take. Honestly, I don't know if I have a hot take per se, other than I think this team's going to be. I used this analogy a couple of years ago with the Astros. The Astros for 2 or 3 seasons were the worst team in Major League Baseball. Lost 100 games. People weren't paying attention to them. They weren't watching. They weren't going to games. But that's an organization that built organically. And obviously, over the years, they've been able to bring in some outside guys. But originally, their success was because of homegrown talent. And as those players got better and the team got better, this city really fell in love and embraced the Astros. And I always hope that the way the Rockets and the way that Rafael Stone and Tillman Fertitta and the Fertitta family have led this rebuild, they've been very patient, extremely patient, which is extremely hard to do. They've built this team organically from the ground floor up. And as these young guys are growing and have gotten better, I hope that I think this is a group that people are going to love and embrace, because a lot of people felt like all that young talent the Astros had, they felt like they were part of their family because they were young guys that they brought up and brought along. These are all young guys for the most part that have been brought up and brought along. And I think it's something that people can really fall in love with and embrace. The Texans have done that, I think, as well, and have achieved a lot of quick success too, because they just absolutely hit the jackpot with CJ Stroud. Texans are going to be, and the Astros run has been unparalleled. The Texans are going to be really, really, really good for a really, really long time, because he plays the most important position in sports and he is an absolute stud. And so people, when you have young players like that you draft and you develop and they have success, I just hope that this is a group, much like fans have embraced the Texans and fans have embraced the Astros, that the fans in this city and the fans of the Rockets in general really sort of fall in love with and embrace and support moving forward, because I think that really kind of makes your experience a lot more fun and enjoyable. And so I know that's not hot takey-ish. That's more pie in the sky stuff. But I think this is a group that people can get behind and root for, because they're all homegrown. They've all put in the work. And I think ultimately when they enjoy success, it'll make everybody else feel better about it too.
It's a great answer. I'll take that over the hot
no take. Hot take there.
And I 100% agree. Young team, a lot of room for growth. They should be, on that same path as the Texans.
A lot of likable people with the Rockets, the players. They're all likable guys. So, all people you can root for. So I just hope people embrace that, come out and support the team, watch us on Space City Home Network, and we'll let the chips fall where they may this season.
Definitely.
That'll do it for us. I have no more questions. Craig, you were awesome. I think you gave us not in a bad way. You gave us everything we needed from this interview today. You. So I appreciate you taking the time out your day to come on our show. We said it off the show. I'll say it again. I tell it to Ryan. I say it to Vanessa every time they come on. I have to listen to Space City Home Network when I watch the games. No disrespect to no other broadcast team, but I think we have the best one, in my honest opinion. So I had to listen to the home team. We're doing the broadcast. I think you guys do an amazing job at that. And just overall, just how welcoming and inviting you guys are, as to the fan base. We really appreciate that. We take note of that. So
thank you. I appreciate it. Appreciate y'all. Love working. Again, like I said, love working with those two. Our job is to inform and entertain and have some fun. Sometimes we succeed at that. Sometimes we don't, but that's our goal every time out. And again, it was a really fun season last year. And I think it's going to be as much fun, if not more so, this season. So I'm looking forward to it. I cannot wait to get back to work training camp, media day, preseason, just a couple of weeks away, and I am chomping at the bit to get going again. So I appreciate you guys having me, and you guys do a great job supporting the fan base too. So we appreciate what you guys do, and happy to come on anytime.
Yeah, as Will said, thank you for coming on the show. This is one of my favorite episodes. We told a lot of guys, hey, this is one of our favorite ones, but this one particularly, a ton of gems.
Oh, you tell that to everybody.
No, but this one feels like, this one's top 3. This is
as the only, I joked about this earlier, but when we were off air, but as the only person in America without a podcast, I'm happy to come on and talk. We could probably fill 3 hours.
We could.
Yeah.
I one thing that I do well is I can talk. So,
yeah, I'll say
we blew through like an hour and 15 minutes just like that. So I'm good.
Yeah, one thing I noticed when I talk to you at those Rockets draft parties, it's so easy to have conversation with you. So we could go for hours.
You know what? I feel like I'm approachable. I trust me. I love what I do. I'm again honored and blessed to do what I do, to represent this organization and work for the people and represent the people that I work for. I pinch myself every day. I still can't believe that I have an opportunity and I get paid to do this. And so I never take that for granted. So thank you guys. I really appreciate it.
Yeah. Yeah. And you are approachable. I want to tell the people, if you haven't had a chance to talk to Ryan, Craig, or Vanessa, probably the nicest crew in the NBA, maybe. I'm just talking, I don't know about the other crews, but they're extremely nice, very genuine. You can go up, talk to them. They're good people. So
you can't shun people when you're starting to lose your hair. So that's not cool.
I hear you. That's too funny. But yeah,
it happens. Getting older ain't great, but it beats the alternative.
I hear you. And as you mentioned, Will and I were welcome to have you on anytime, especially next offseason. You're busy during the season, so we won't bother you. But next offseason, for sure.
Sounds like a plan. Well, obviously, we'll see you guys on down the road. And again, thanks for having me. I appreciate the time.
Yeah, and we'll close here. Guys, if you're still watching, Will's birthday is at midnight, so wish him
happy birthday.
Happy birthday. What we turning, Will? 22? What, 23?
24.
No way. Are you really?
Yeah.
I have a son older than you, so there you go.
Yeah.
Happy birthday, though.
Yeah, happy birthday, Will. And thank you guys for watching. Thank you, Craig, for coming on. And that was an episode of the Bradeaux Show.